All right, we're recording. Star one, right? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Charge What You're Worth, featuring Brennan Dunn of Double Your Freelancing. To introduce myself, my name is Emily Stringer, and I'll be moderating your webinar today. A little background on me. I've been with MBO for just over 6 years, and I work as a consultant services advisor. It's my job to respond to requests from independent contractors who are curious about MBO Partners service offering. This is done through consultation appointments, where we learn more about your background and your needs and determine if MBO services are the right fit for you. MBO's mission statement is to make it easy for independent contractors and their clients to work together. For a high-level overview, we offer a complete, all-inclusive business operating platform for independent consultants. We take care of the administrative items that are typically outsourced to several different vendors, such as incorporation, contract review, liability coverage, invoicing, expense review and processing, tax withholding and payroll, and access to tax-efficient portable benefits. Now for a few housekeeping items for our webinar setup. First and foremost, you can see all of the controls listed here. Secondly, we will be emailing a slide deck and a recorded copy of the entire webinar to all of the registrants within 1 week. Last, we'll be taking questions throughout that will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Any questions that we do not get will be answered via email after the presentation. Next, we will be live tweeting today's webinar using hashtag MBOWeb, and our handle is @MBOPartners. Now to introduce today's presenter, Brennan Dunn. He's the founder of Double Your Freelancing, and his company helps to teach freelancers and consultants how to earn more money and work better with clients. He's the creator of Double Your Freelancing Rate, Double Your Freelancing Academy, and a number of other courses for consultants. His free pricing course, Charge What You're Worth, has been known to help thousands of freelancers and consultants charge what they're worth. Brennan, from here, we'll turn the presentation over to you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Hi.
Roger that.
Hey, everyone. So my name is Brennan Dunn. As mentioned, I'm the founder of doubleyourfreelancing.com. But before that, I want to give you a quick overview in terms of how I got to do what I'm doing now and a bit about kind of my background in a nutshell. So back in 2006, I went out on my own as a freelancer. At the time, probably like many of you, I didn't really have too much of an idea in terms of how I would actually run and sustain this business. I just wanted to do what I love doing, which in my case was web development for a number of clients instead of a single employer. And right around 2008, I got to this crossroads where I could either turn away work or grow a proper agency or a bigger company. And I decided to do the latter. I scaled my business up to 11 employees. We're based here in Norfolk, Virginia, or we were based in Norfolk, Virginia. And then I decided to take a stab at building my own software company, because I had built many software companies for other clients of mine with my web development business. And so I started a company called PlanScope, which is, I should say, a project management tool for freelancers and agencies. and built that up. And then through that, one of the ways of selling software is to create content about that's tangential to the software being created. So I did a lot of writing about getting clients, charging what you're worth, just a lot of the things I've learned building up an agency and getting beyond the freelancer gun for hire to having a multi-million-dollar a year web development agency. So I sold that company, PlanScope, actually at the beginning of last year in 2016. And since then, I've been full-time on what came from that, which was Double Your Freelancing, which originally was, the purpose was to generate leads for PlanScope. And then it became independently a seven-figure plus business that I've been running now for about 5 years. And what I've done is the presentation you're going to be seeing today is a talk I gave at 99U last year in New York. And it was probably one of the most well-received talks that I've given. And when MBO reached out saying, "Hey, we'd love to have you, give a webinar to our audience," I figured this would be the best one to give. And so what we're going to be talking about today is how to sell and price the right way. On my side, I can see the webinar controls on the right side. Can you guys see that, or is it good to go? I want to make sure when you're sharing my screen, you don't see that. It's only the presentation. Okay, I'm going to assume that it looks good. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first off minimize, if I can find it. Here we go. I can't see my cursor, but hold on 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. I'm trying to see my cursor so I can. No, I don't want to leave the webinar. There we go. I want to minimize the GoToWebinar screen. There we go. Okay, let's get back. So a new lead comes along, and again, I don't know what you do, but I typically talk to web designers, web developers, programmers, writers, marketers, anyone who sells services to businesses. And the usual conversation is something like, "Hey, you design websites, right? Here's what I'm looking for." And we go from there. We take what the lead says at face value, and we jump immediately into what it is they think they want. So we might ask them a few questions. We might meet them for coffee. We maybe then exchange a few phone calls and emails. And then from there, we kind of go into our cave and we write a proposal and we throw it over the wall, and then we wait. And we wait, and sometimes we wait even longer. And that's typically the life cycle of selling consulting. You determine what needs to be done. You go away, you put together a proposal, and then you send it over and you cross your fingers. Then what often happens is the client, or they're not a client, the person comes back and says, "I have a few questions about what you sent me. Can we talk?" So then we invest a few more hours into getting the sale. And we've ended up now spending a lot of time with the goal or with the pursuit of getting a new client. And the outcome is binary. We either win the project or we don't. You either get the contract or you spend a lot of time and have really nothing to show for it. So the problem is such. I did a lot of surveys. So I have an audience now of about 40,000 people, and I ran a survey a while back asking them about how much time do they spend courting, I guess you could say, new clients. So how much time do you spend meeting with them, how much time do you spend writing the proposal, and so on. And the average came out to be about a 1-hour initial meeting with the new lead, a 30-minute follow-up discussion, usually over the phone, spending about 1.5 hours or so scoping out a project, at your office or, again, remotely. And then finally, spending about 2 hours writing a proposal and maybe a 30-minute follow-up meeting to go over the proposal. So you can see that quite a few hours are spent in order to close a deal. Now, the issue becomes you spend about 5.5 hours at this point, and there's no guarantee that you've done anything, that you've won anything. You basically spent almost, what would that be, a quarter of your work week courting somebody who you hope turns into a new client. Now, in further surveying, I realized that on average, most of us close about 33% of our leads. So about 1 in 3 leads end up becoming a client. So basic back of the napkin math means that it takes, on average, 16.5 hours to get a new client in terms of transactional, time on the phone, time spent in meetings, time spent driving to and from meetings, in order to get a new client. Now, for a lot of us, it's not an issue given how big our budgets can be. For 5-6-figure plus budgets, spending that amount of time, we kind of assume is a cost of doing business. It's a loss leader in a way, right? My job here today is to basically help you minimize the amount of time it takes to get a new client. And the best way of doing that is to optimizing for conversion. So if you can get 2 out of 3 people becoming clients of yours, now you're less than 9 or less than 10 hours spent getting a new client. If we can increase how much efficiency we have in these meetings and everything else, we're then able to, again, minimize the overall overhead, the sales overhead of getting a new client. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And to preface all of this, I want to give you kind of a look at that timeline that I kind of briefly mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. So 2006, I started working for myself. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing. It was really a legal switch. I went from being an employee to working on a 1099 basis with a few companies, at the time, one company, and I didn't really know what I should be charging. So I looked at my former salary, which was $105,000 at an agency in Miami Beach, and I divided that by 2,000. That's a online calculator told me, just do that, and you'll figure out your rate. So I did that. And so I was billing $50 an hour when I started, which at the time I thought was pretty good. And what you're seeing here is kind of the overall effective hourly income for myself and my business over the last X number of years. Now, I put together this presentation in 2014, so I don't have data since then, but it's actually now well above 1,000 an hour. And I'm going to tell you in this presentation what I've done to do that. And it's not that I've become amazing at what I do, or any more amazing, I should say, at what I do, or learn new skills or anything like that. What I did is I really just started to reframe exactly the work I was doing for my clients. So there was this inflection point in late 2011. And what was happening around then was I was surrounding myself with people who were, in my mind, and actually a lot smarter than me. So really good business consultants, people who I could learn as much as I could from, because again, I was growing this agency. I had at the time probably about 8 or 9 employees. We were doing, small number of, a few million a year in project revenue. And I really wanted to get away from what I was seeing was becoming this uncontrollable sales cycle where I was spending just a lot of money, or a lot of time and money, because I had a full-time business development person, pursuing clients, doing the sales thing and everything else. So what happened at this inflection point? What happened was I stopped selling myself and my team as a commodity. So historically, I mentioned to you when we started that I'm a web developer by training. So what I assumed people were paying me for was for web development. So they needed websites built, they needed web apps commissioned or something like that. And the problem there was I was positioning myself as a commodity because, again, if all I'm doing is I'm offering web development as pay me money and I will deliver web development services to you. The issue then becomes, well, they go on websites like Upwork, or they go, to Craigslist or any number of different marketplaces or platforms, and they're looking like, hey, there's people in Pakistan who, for $10 an hour, will also do web development. Why should I be paying you a lot of money, the money you want me to pay you? And I didn't really know how to answer that because, again, I thought, well, I had some answers that weren't that great. I was, one of them was, well, I'm in your time zone. I'm local to you. I speak your language fluently. But those aren't really, if you think about it, those aren't really convincing arguments. So the big change, though, was I stopped selling myself and my team as a commodity. And what I did is I went through this, I started adapting and learning about this process I could put in place where what we could do eventually was to set ourselves up really as first-class consultants who looked at a problem, diagnosed the problem, solved it, and ended up happening to use web development to solve the problem instead of just saying, we will swing our hammer for you for this much money an hour. So that's what allowed us to raise our rates to what they are today. Nowadays, the last project I closed was a $45,000 project that took about a little north of 40 hours of work to actually complete. So I don't know what the effective hourly rate is, but it's high. And what I'm getting at, and what I'm not trying to impress or anything like that, what I'm trying to say is I focused on the value of the work I was doing. So that's what we're going to be looking at now, is how can you quantify the value of your client's projects and then price accordingly. So ultimately, how can you bill on value? How do you price on value? So the first thing I do in order to value price the work that I do is when a new client comes to me and they have a project, right? I try to Socratically get to the root of the problem. So what's Socratically mean? Well, before, and the MBO people will probably find this interesting, before I got into what I do now, back in the late 90s, I was starting to go to school, or went to college up in Annapolis, Maryland, at a school called St. John's College, which is a liberal arts school, and they study the classics. So we read a lot of the Platonic dialogues, and in them, Socrates walks around Athens and takes people and leads them to a kind of like a philosophical awakening through conversation. So that's all. Socratic questioning is just it's a way of conversing with somebody in order to lead them to a realization that you have in mind. So it's what psychologists use, lawyers use Socratic questioning. It's something that we, as effectively salespeople, need to be using in order to effectively sell our premium services to clients. So when a client comes to me and they have a project, first I listen. This is what everyone does. What is the project and what does the client think should be done? Again, you do this, your competitors do this, everyone does this. The difference, though, is most people will say, well, then jump into the technical. So if it's a website project, okay, how many web pages is the site going to have? What's it going to look like? What theme are we going to use? What content management system are we going to employ? What I do differently is at that point, after they've told me exactly what they think they want, I'm interested to understand what is the trigger. So what actually led them to wake up that morning and call somebody like me? So was it a single event, or was it a series of events that brought this project to life? And I just do this through that discussion. I ask them, so tell me a bit about what led you today to reach out to somebody like me. Why did you feel a need to contact me? And once I've identified what this trigger is, I want to understand what the business problem is behind the trigger. So what actual business problem is led them to determine, oh, I need a new, in this case, in my case, website. Because if you look at the life cycle of the typical project, and it doesn't matter what kind of work you do, it's the same. Somebody has an issue. Somebody has a problem that they want solved. Somebody then needs to determine that this problem can be solved. Then they determine that this problem can be solved by hiring somebody like you, and then they go and they look for people like you and they contact you. So that's typically the life cycle of that kind of that path to understanding how a client can solve a problem. And we're usually only at the tail end of that decision-making process. So I need to know, how can I peel back the layers and realize exactly what led them here? Because if I know what the problem is and I know what the solution needs to be, I can end up doing a better project for them. Because value-based pricing, charging more, it's not about charging more, it's about delivering a better product, it's delivering a better service. And to do that, you need to know what's at stake. You need to know what business problem is precipitating the project that they brought to you. So once I've highlighted what that problem is, and 9 out of 10 times for a B2B related, a business, it's something like they don't have enough customers, or their cash flow is low, which means that they're not able to scale the way they want to. They can't open up that new location, something like that, right? Like it's usually that they either want to make more money or they want to stop spending as much money on, maintaining their business. So then I want to know, how painful is the problem? So what effect does this problem have on their business if it goes undiagnosed? So at this point, I'm kind of like a doctor. I'm saying, okay, you're complaining that you're in pain. And you think that this is what you need. Well, as the surgeon here, I'm going to go in and triage you and figure out exactly what actually is the root of this pain you have. Is it, what could be the cause? What could be the underlying issue? And then if this goes unfixed, what's that going to do to you? So I want to understand how painful that problem is. And then I want to understand, to the best of my ability, what is the cost? What is the financial impact of having this problem go unsolved? And this is where it gets a little sensitive at times. I mean, a lot of businesses aren't going to hand this information over to you. So if you're like me, you hate it when a client comes to you before before they've told you anything and they bring you a non-disclosure agreement. This is actually where I bring out my non-disclosure agreement, and I tell them, in order for me to really, I want to make sure I work on projects that when I do the work and I deliver the result, that there's going to be a financial ROI. And the only way for me to know that is to know what is at stake currently. So what is hindering you from, how is this problem affecting you financially? So that's where I bring out my non-disclosure agreement. I sign it there. And that actually, what I've seen is that it basically encourages a lot of trust between myself and my clients, because they know they're talking to a fellow business person. They're not talking to just some amateur freelancer, coder, designer, whatever. They're talking to somebody, a peer who has something, who could potentially do something mutually valuable for both parties. So what is the cost? And then I want to understand, what should tomorrow look like? So if this problem could go away, if I had a magic wand and this problem went away, what would happen for their business? Would they be able to open that new location? Could they hire more employees? Could their owner maybe just stop stressing every month about the state of their cash flow? So this is what I do first. I try to this is all done through conversation. I try to just understand to the best of my ability what's at stake, what led them to me, what is the actual problem, what happens if this problem doesn't go unsolved, both for them reputationally as a business and also financially, and then if this problem were to go away, what would that look like for them? So after I've done this, I then lead into the next phase of the conversation. And again, this is just usually in that initial sales meeting. Now, sometimes one thing that I do, which is kind of beyond the scope of this webinar, is I actually charge for this. So this becomes a paid service that I call road mapping. And that's worked extremely well for me, because I'm able to, the client is much more serious and they come to the table much better prepared when this isn't a sales meeting, but instead it's something that they're paying for. It's kind of like it's a consultation, really, if you think about it. So the second step of this, whether you're doing this through a paid channel like road mapping or just a free sales meeting, is to then identify what I call the project's financial upside. So if this problem does go fixed, what is the value of that to them financially? So what I do is I start by identifying the client's revenue model, and then I work backward to figure out how I'm able to make a difference. So the example I like to give is one of my students who he ended up doing a website redesign for a rehabilitation clinic. So people who are addicted to different substances and everything, they'll go there and they'll get fixed. So they came to him saying, we wanted a new website. And he knew that they weren't willing to spend a lot of money because they just like buying websites. The website was a tool, it was a part of their overall business's sales funnel. So what he ended up doing is he's worked backwards after he realized that they make money by getting patients to come in. He worked backward to figure out exactly what role he could have in that funnel. So he found out that the value of a patient, if they get a patient in a bed or to be checked into that clinic, the value is about $30,000. And again, this is all through conversation. So once he realized that, he said, well, I can't change how much money they make per patient. I'm just a humble web designer. I can't affect that. But he worked backwards, and he realized that it took about 1 out of 10 people who ended up becoming a sales lead, if you want to put it so bluntly, of this clinic ended up getting checked in. So that meant that the value of a lead, the value of a qualified contact, was $3,000. So now he's starting to see, okay, I can work with this, because if I can help them get more leads by designing a better website that's single purpose is to get them more leads, then the value of each new lead I generate for them is $3,000. So if I can just get them one new lead a month, over 12 months, it's $36,000 in new revenue that they don't have currently. So if my focus becomes not on what's it going to look like, or what are the features going to be, or what should it technically do, or whatever else, and instead think, how can I get this business more leads valued at $3,000 a pop through web design, through everything associated with web design? He knew that's actually what they wanted. They didn't want the website, they wanted that, but they usually don't bring you that. They don't say, we want this website because we want leads at $3,000 a pop. So he had to really figure this out, again, through conversation. So what is the average value or impact of what you can control? So he can control how many leads they get from their website. And you wanted to figure out exactly what the average value was. So regardless of what kind of work you do, if you're a writer and you do content creation for businesses, well, what role, like how does the writing you do fit into their overall sales funnel? And it's important for you to know that, because that will allow you to write the right stuff. It will allow you to write better, and that's exactly what you want to do as a premium consultant. You want to understand, what do they actually need from you? Not technically what needs to get done, but the technicals are really just a means to an end. And until you internalize that no one's ever paid you because they want a website, no one's ever paid you because they want a new app built, no one's ever paid you because they want a Facebook campaign run for them or an article written for them. They pay you because they want that medium that you work in to deliver them some sort of value, to deliver them something that outweighs the cost they put into you. I mean, it makes sense, but a lot of us don't really, we don't internalize that. We don't make that a part of how we sell. So again, once we've done that, we want to figure out how we can optimize, for instance, what they're currently doing now, how what they're bringing to us is currently performing in their overall funnel. And we want to use some back-of-the-napkin math to really figure out what that means for their business. Again, if they were to get just one new lead a month, what would that mean for their business long-term? So after we've done this, after we've learned about the problem at stake and what the financial upside is for solving that problem, we then want to anchor our costs around that upside. Because ultimately, the issue is, when most of us present our price, if I were to just quote you and say, I'm going to charge you, I don't know, $20,000 for a new website, what you force the buyer to do is to start thinking about, well, is that the right price? Is that overpriced? Is that underpriced? You're leaving it kind of in this contextless void, where it's up to the buyer to determine, is this the right price for what I'm buying? And what your price should be is, it should be the ticket cost for the ferry that brings them from today to tomorrow. I mean, that's all it is. It's going to be the value they need to put into the equation in order to go from where they are today to where they are tomorrow. And if you're just giving people a line item list of, I will do this, 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 and this for you, you're leaving it up to in this case, the buyer to figure out, is that the right price? Am I being ripped off, or am I not, is this too cheap? I mean, you can lose work because they're too cheap, as strange as that might sound. So ultimately, when you present your price, it should be the cost from here to there. And this price cannot exist in a vacuum. It will be pegged to the financial upside we've identified with the help of the project lead. And then ultimately, you want to offer packages and price and package these offerings based off of completeness. So actually, what you don't want to do is, if you just produce one price or one option, the only option that client or that buyer has is, do I buy or not buy? Do I pay, in this case, Brennan, or do I not pay Brennan? We don't want that to happen. Instead, we want to offer multiple options. We want to say, do I do option A or option B? Because people like choice, people like having that control. And ultimately, it's better for them, because you allow them, it's like the project becomes like a choose your own adventure story, where they're able to choose which path makes the most sense for them and their business and their budget at this point. So again, packages provide, A or B versus buy or don't buy. And the packages, when it comes to how do you actually come up with what your different offerings might be, and again, for most of you, this is going to be always done one-off. You're putting together a custom proposal. If you want to go beyond that, I'd encourage you to look into how to do productized consulting, where you can then have a well-positioned, more normalized offering that you don't need to produce a custom proposal for each client. You have a service offering that bakes into it everything we're talking about here. So again, you want to have A, B, or C versus buy or don't buy. And again, that's easy when you know what the problem is and where they need to get to. Because if you think about it, the example I like to give is, imagine that you get stuck outside and it starts to rain on you. The problem is, say it's a chilly day, which it isn't here today in Virginia. But if it was, you would be wet and you'd be cold and uncomfortable, right? Like, that's the problem that the rain has caused. So in order to solve that problem, the solution is to not be wet, to not be cold, and to not be uncomfortable. The solution is not to have the rain stop or to block the rain. The solution is to stop having those three things happen. So the offer, what it is you can do to make that happen, I mean, there are a number of different things, a number of different ways to do that, right? On the low end, you could find a dumpster, put a piece of cardboard over your head, and now you're not as wet. You're probably still a bit wet, and maybe you're not as uncomfortable, but now you're somewhat drier, right? So that, let's say that's kind of partially completed or partially gotten you to the solution that you thought you needed, which is to stop being wet, cold, and uncomfortable. You could also go a little, higher up and get a really good umbrella. Now you're blocking probably all the rain, and you're a lot more, comfortable, and you're not getting wet and everything else. But you're still probably a bit cold, and you're still out in the elements and everything else. But that might get you most of the way there. And then on the high end, you could walk inside of a really nice hotel with a roaring fireplace, and they offer you a change of clothes, and you get into a robe, and you have some tea, and you sit in front of the fireplace, and now you're not wet, you're not uncomfortable, and you're not cold. So that's how when I come up with the packages that I offer my clients, I look at, well, where do they need to get to, and what are the varying different ways that we can get there? And obviously the cardboard over the head is going to be a lot less expensive than the, going inside of the nice, cozy hotel and getting warm. But that allows you to let the client determine, based on their budgetary constraints, which is best for them at this point. Maybe they don't feel like they need to get all the way to the solution. Maybe they just need to start getting halfway there. But until you know what the solution is and where they are now, it becomes really tricky to figure out, well, what are the different offers or packages that I can present? So finally, after you've done all this, you want to then represent your path to the solution as the proposal. So your proposal is the summation of the problem behind the project, which you identify via Socratic questioning. And it's also how you can solve that problem along with the associated financial upside. The first number they see will not be their cost. Because if you think about, let me go on a tangent real quick. Most proposals that I see, I work with a lot of consultants, contractors, freelancers, and when I get a proposal, almost all of them are pretty identical in that here's a bit about, a blurb about, the project at hand, who they are, here's a line item list of things that they're going to be doing, here's, what they're going to charge per hour or maybe the total cost, here's how long it will take, here are some terms and conditions, then a sign here to accept. And the problem with this approach is the first number they're seeing first off is the cost. And they're kind of left again in this vacuum of, okay, this person wants to do this, this, and this. They're charging me that. Is that the right price? Is that what I should be doing? Your proposal should be really a sales letter for what? It should be saying, here again is the problem that we've identified. Here's where you need to get to. Here's what's at stake. And that's where you're mixing in current numbers, any numbers you've got that you've identified through this questioning about financial upside, about how they're being impacted at the moment, any figures that you can include and everything else, so that when they get to the price, they realize, when they get to your cost, they see that as an investment rather than an expense. So if I get a quote or proposal, and it's, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and here's what it's going to cost you, I'm internalizing that as an expense. Whereas if I were to get here's where you are now, here's where you want to be, here's my plan on getting you there, here's what getting you there would do for your business, here's the value of that for your business, and here's my cost, the cost is always going to be lower. So I'm looking at that as an investment. So I'm spending this to get that. And that's what you want your buyers to be thinking, to be looking at. But when you're just offering line items with total summations, you're leaving it up to them, which you don't want to do. You're leaving it up to the client to determine, is this going to get me where I need to get to? Because just buying a website, buying writing, buying marketing, buying whatever it is you do, doesn't actually imply that you're going to solve anything, right? It just means that you're going to give them the new website as they're asking you. But when you can come in and you can say, here's the state of your rehabilitation clinic today. Here's my plan for helping you generate more leads online. Here's some examples of how I've done this in the past. Here's what you would stand to gain by doing this, both monthly, annually, and then hey, option A could be just redesigning your site to get you that one new lead a month, just to focus on lead gen. Option B could be, now that we know the value per lead, let's do some paid acquisition to get more leads per month. And if we can keep people under, let's say, $1,000 per acquired lead, we're making a $2,000 profit off each lead we generate, given that the quality is constant. And you're then able to work with them on this kind of consulting basis to do what you do best, which is the technical work that you started your business, in the first place in mind with. And then finally, like I said, you want your proposal to ultimately be more like a sales letter rather than a line item order sheet. And it positions you as a premium consultant laser focused on the problem at hand rather than just someone with technical chops. Because ultimately what you're doing here is you're trying to deliver a better product. You're ultimately giving them a better thing at the end of the day than you would have if you didn't have this information, if you didn't do this kind of questioning. Here's an example of one of my clients that this one's from about a year and a half ago, so it's a bit dated. But this was a $20,000 a week project where if you knew what I do technically, I do some copywriting, some front-end development work, a bit of design, but not much, and I wire it all together using off-the-shelf marketing apps. And the going rate, the market rate of that is nowhere near what I charge, but I'm so laser focused on here's where you are, here's where you want to get to, here's how we can safely get you there. And by the way, I only want to do work for you if I can guarantee an ROI, and the best way to guarantee that is to have total transparency and also for me to understand exactly where you are now and what's at stake. And then when I'm able to price, I'm pretty introverted. I couldn't go to somebody and look them in the eye and say, oh, I'm, the last project I did, which was about a little over a week work for what my, neighbors make in a year. Again, this isn't a gloat, but it's just saying, like, I wouldn't be able to do that. Like, I'm not that confident of a person. But when I'm confident in the sense that I know the value I'm delivering because we've gone through the exercise of starting and figuring out exactly where are they now, what's at stake, and how can we get them from here to there. And I'm really focused on a high level on their business, and I'm less focused on what I'll technically do because it's up to me to figure out what's technically going to happen. And when I started doing this, both as an agency and individually, it's been night and day for myself and my clients. I mean, obviously, I'm making more money, but I'm closing more leads. Because I have a better sales process. I'm making more money, and I'm also given more creative freedom. I'm given more responsibility than if I'm not just hey, I need a doer to do it for me. They look at me more as a partner and ally because I start off the relationship with their business as the very first thing we talk about. So like I just mentioned, I'm able to close more projects, I'm able to raise my rates, and I gain more creative freedom doing all of this. So to get started, it's critical, no matter what, if you can just take away one thing, I ask you to internalize again, focus on the problem. Focus on why are they willing to spend $20,000 on a project. They don't, trust me, they don't enjoy spending that kind of money. They're doing it because they feel like by spending that, they'll get something more in return. And until we're on the same wavelength as our clients in terms of what it is they need in return, we could technically succeed. We could technically do the right thing, but we could fail when it comes to helping their business. We also want to quantify the value that we bring to the table. So what would it mean in real and concrete figures to solve our clients' problems? And finally, we want to create processes that move leads through our funnel. So we want to have command over our sales funnel. We don't just want to say, yeah, let's jump on a random call to talk about your business. You want to be armed with a process that leads them safely from here to there. And ultimately, you should be developing the right templates that you can leverage throughout each step of the sales process. So, when I get a new client lead, I send them the very first thing I automate when I qualify them. So I ask them, a few different questions about, what kind of liquidity do they have on hand? Are they the sole decision maker? What's the business problem? And just in a very quick way. And I ask these questions prior to moving forward, which in my case forward is a paid road mapping engagement. And then I, again, send them, I have documents every step of the way that let people know that I've done this before. I'm not an amateur. I'm walking them through a tried and true process, and people want that. People don't want to, it's too risky just to hire somebody smart. What they want is they want to be able to pay for something and get the results that they need. So if you're overwhelmed, I've got your back. Like I said, I've been doing this for a while now. I do have a full course that some of you might have heard of. I've had over 8,000 people go through this. Just for MBO, I'm offering 30% off through Sunday night at midnight Eastern Time. But what it is it's a self-study course that covers just more in depth everything we just covered today, along with all the templates, scripts, everything you need, along with something new, which is a 1 month of daily webcam to webcam coaching with myself and my team. So it's myself and 7 other teachers that I work with who were available every day, Monday through Friday, to jump on a call with and to ask any question you have about consulting or current client or an issue with maybe a subcontractor or whatever else. That's a new service that we've been doing for the last few months that is picking up in popularity, and we're including 1 month, again with MBO. So it's very in-depth. If you want to find out more about that, you can go to doubleyourfreelancing.com/MBO workshop. But what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to any questions that have come up during this presentation. You guys might be on mute, by the way. I don't have any, I don't know what questions have come up. So,
All right, can you hear us now?
there we go, yeah.
All right, we were double muted. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was excellent advice. We get lots of questions within my department on value-based bill rates because mostly what we see are hourly rates or deliverable rates. And regardless of how an independent contractor charges, I think this really hits home for everyone. So I really appreciate you being with us and giving us some insight into your world and how you see bill rates. So with that said, we will jump into a couple of questions here, and I'll go through what we have one by one. But before I do that, just a friendly reminder to those who are on the line that we will be sending out a copy of the slide deck within the next week. And if you're interested in the entire presentation, we will have that available via YouTube as well. So with that said, I'll dive into a couple of questions that popped up here. So the first one, Brennan, this was pertaining to nonprofits and universities. So how can you see your advice translating into those fields within the nonprofit and university space?
Yeah, so not to be too cynical, but it ultimately all boils down to money. I've worked with nonprofits with my agency, and ultimately what we were doing was translating what I'm talking about now and getting more customers to how do we get more donations? How do we increase the number of donors we have or the average donation size or something like that. Universities, student enrollment. I mean, I've done internal things too. Like, for instance, we worked with a local university and we were doing help desk software for them. That was internal. So it wasn't going to boost their enrollment by having good help desk software. So what we did instead was we really focused on, well, what is the overhead now? Like, how is it frustrating the students and staff at at the university as a result of having this clunky, homegrown, help desk software that you're using now. And we framed it also in terms of, well, how much overhead internally when it comes to staff is being spent on this? Because a lot of the work we did as application developers literally put people out of business sometimes because we would replace permanent positions with automation or software. And so we're always a little more optimistic about that by trying to say, well, how can we free up people who are stuck in Excel or free up people who are stuck in this manual thing again and again and allow them to focus on better things so that we can get this off their plate. So again, it's all contextual. It's all dependent, and especially like big companies, for instance, like really big companies, the department you're working with might be very far removed from any sort of revenue or anything like that. So at that point, it becomes a matter of, well, how do you make your client look better internally? How do you make their department look great internally? And which ultimately, I mean, you still want to boost the company holistically, but it becomes a matter of helping them realize that by working with you, I mean, one way to, again, to value price would be, well, again, it's not their money anyway, but you want them to look great on their next performance review because they hired you and your team. So that's what we did. Again, not to get too cynical, but with nonprofits, with that kind of stuff, there's often still money involved. It just might not be as obvious or overt. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's usually my thinking toward it is again, look at what the client, the individual values, and try to figure out how what it is you do can amplify what they value.
Great, thank you, Brennan. I think at the end of the day, it all boils down to money, regardless of who the entity is. Onward to our next question. Over what time period, months or years, do you present gains to a potential client to secure the business?
You mean post-delivery? So if I do a project, how do I then quantify the overall payoff, or do you mean in terms of doing the work, like looking at kind of numbers?
I'm interpreting this as pre-delivery.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I do is, I mean, it obviously depends on the kind of work you do and whatever else. What I do consulting-wise is I help companies that are selling products or services online. They're using some degree of content marketing to get people, hopefully, to buy more of that, but it's not happening the way they want it to. So I look at things like website traffic, number of subscribers are getting organically, like newsletter subscribers or lead magnet subscribers or whoever else. But I also look at total sales, usually monthly, but also annually. And then in my world, it's figuring out the valuation per subscriber and saying, how can we make subscribers more valuable by ultimately getting more of them to buy? So that's what I'm focused on, and what that usually means for me is I look at annual data. I look at any data they can get. I mean, the tricky fact is, 90% of my customers don't have the data that I need rather. If I were to ask them, what is the lifetime value of a customer of yours, a lot of them scratch their heads. Or if I were to ask them, what is the value of a person that comes through Facebook and joins your newsletter, a lot of them just don't have that. They don't even know how to figure out that data, which to me is good because by asking that, I'm showing them a weakness that they should be filling. So it ends up helping me when it comes to sales. But yeah, so I mean that's my thinking on that is there's no right answer. It's just try to collect as much data as you can and do the analysis alongside the hopefully future client and figure out exactly valuation based off that.
Great, thank you for that, Brennan. Next step, do you ever look at market competitive rates for other consultants in your area, and how does that factor into what you charge?
I don't care what other people charge. I don't even consider, so again, technically I write some JavaScript code, I write some copy, email newsletter copy, or email marketing automation copy, and I do marketing automation stuff, again, a little design work too, but what other people charge what web developers charge, or what JavaScript developers charge, or what copywriters charge, I don't consider that at all. And a big reason for that, I think, is, I've gotten, oftentimes I'm 10x more than the competition, but I still win the project because I'm a safer bet. So even though, cost, the reason people don't want to pay you a lot or pay you maybe what you should be charging, is because they feel that, money is the ultimate risk mitigator. So the less they pay, the less they pay, the more, even if it ends up failing as a project. Remember, you can technically succeed, but you can fail. I try to increase what I call my credit score with a client by showing them, better ways to the end goal. I really focus on the problem-solution pairing. I focus on the milestone. I offer probably the best objection overcoming tool at my disposal, which is I will not, and I mean this, I will not take on a project unless both myself and the client can come to an understanding that there's a very clear path, in my case, for a 6-figure ROI within 6 months. That's my metric. So if I don't see how we can make 100K or more within 6 months on top of what I'm billing, I don't want the project. And what that does is comparing that versus I'll bang on my keyboard for X much an hour. I'm selling them a product instead of selling them time and availability. And the product, by definition, has more inherent stability or less risk, I guess, than just hiring somebody for time.
Great advice there. This next question comes from someone who looks like they might be doing some government contracting. So the question here is, value-based compensation works very well and effectively in a time-oriented environment. But what have you seen, or what do you recommend in a time and material or retainer-based environment?
Yeah, so I actually don't sell time. I fix price everything I do. And the reason for that is it's better for the client because they're able to then, again, everyone wants a product. Everyone wants to pay X and get Y in return. So by fixed pricing it, for me, it's better. It's better for that equation. Sometimes I've done weekly billing rates. I also do a lot of monthly retainers, which I actually call monthly subscriptions instead of retainers, because retainers, the typical assumption is you get X many hours a month for this, which is just really ultimately you're still selling time just at a discount in the future. So yeah, I mean, in terms of, like, let's say monthly or annual kind of payment plans or something that you're doing with the client, with anything ongoing, I mean, there's 3 reasons people typically pay you for ongoing work. It's because they want to optimize what they have. So they want to, if you're a web designer, it could be something like you will do A/B testing for them, you will optimize their site, you will maybe create more content for them that helps increase their kind of organic footprint. Any number of different things that could be done on an ongoing basis to optimize and to improve the asset value of their business. You can also insure. So, as a web developer, we'd have issues where, our clients, let's say we put it out in the wild, there's then a security issue with the framework we're using, or if you guys remember that Heartbleed issue with SSL about a year ago, that caused a lot of websites to panic because now there was an exploit that people could use to basically get into their site. Or it could be backups or something like that. So that's kind of the insurance route. And then there's training. So, a lot of my clients find it valuable to keep somebody like me who keeps my ear to the ground when it comes to what's happening with marketing automation, what they should be thinking about, what they should be doing, and so on. So I offer, in a way, kind of like coaching, but baked into optimization and insurance, and that becomes a nice monthly thing that I anchor against. Well, what would the cost be to hire a permanent team to do a lot of what I'm doing here? I anchor against that, and then it allows me to have a nice few $1,000s a month retainer that doesn't end up taking too much of my time. But I'm not saying for $2,000 a month I'll give you 20 hours of time, because just divide that by 20, you get a $100 an hour rate. And then they ask, well, why can't I just pay you $100 an hour when I need you? And so I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to be doing that, playing that game. I want to be selling a monthly subscription product.
Great. Thank you for the clarification there. We'll take one more question and then get this ramped down. So lastly, I have someone who is asking, this is an approach similar to those I've read by Alan Weiss of $1 Million Consulting and David Fields. They recommend abandoning hourly rates altogether and charging flat fees that are based on value. Do you agree? I think we know the answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, I do. Again, I mean, you should still know your hourly rate, because you should still be treating that as overhead in business and everything, and taking that into account. I'm usually against time-based billing, but yeah, like Alan says, yes. I don't know David, but Alan, he's completely on track with that. I fully agree with what he says about that, because again, if they could, no one would ever hire a service. They would pay for a product, an off-the-shelf product that could give them what they want. And if you can productize your services, if you can productize what it is you're going to be doing manually into you're going to pay this and get this, and this benefit, and and that's it. I mean, that's what people ultimately want. They want to be able to get that, and it's just too hard when you're saying. I mean, some things, to be honest, do make more sense with time-based billing. I abhor hourly. I mean, I was just looking at an invoice from my lawyer, and I got billed $59 because they were trying to open a PDF and they couldn't do it. And I hate seeing that, right? I mean, they billed me like 0.1 hours to do that. And I hate seeing that line item. I'd much prefer just being billed on a bigger thing or something, just so I don't want to know how the sausage is made there. So I typically avoid hourly, but weekly is okay for software development where the scope might be unknown. Some people still do time-based for that, and that's fine. I would just abstract it away as much as you can from an hourly unit and broaden out the units.
All right, great. Brennan, thank you so much again for joining us today and providing us such great insight into value-based billing. We're going to launch a quick poll here for viewers just to see who would like to gather some more information from either MBO partners, from Brennan himself, or from both parties. So I will give everyone about 60 seconds to chime in here. And we'll take about 30 more seconds. Take that down to 15. All right, and we'll go ahead and get this wrapped up. So thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been a pleasure hosting you. And again, feel free to visit us at www.mbopartners.com, and it was a pleasure being with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.